Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, more than half of disabled people in work feel at risk of losing their jobs, and 1 in 2 have experienced bullying or harassment because of their impairments. That's according to new research by the disability charity Scope, ahead of the closing of the government consultation on work, health and disability. This survey highlights the issues that disabled people face in work. Despite the Conservative government promising in their manifesto to halve the disability employment deficit, the employment gap between disabled people and non-disabled has remained static at nearly 30% in the past decade. So why has so little progress been made? Well, with us is a few disabled workers who say they've all experienced discrimination in the workplace. Storm Toulis, Samantha Renk, Madeline Close, all with us here. And welcome to you. Thank you very much for coming in to join us. Storm, I know that you actually, when you go for an interview, don't actually reveal that you're in a wheelchair before you go, do you? Why is that?
No, I don't disclose my disability on my CV or any applications that I give for a job. I think partly it's because I feel like it's my prerogative to want to share that information, but also I think that it could have an impact on the kind of work that I'm offered. I work predominantly as an actor, but I'm also a very freelance education worker, and I work in schools and occasionally as a teaching assistant and various other short-term roles. So finding short-term, sort of not long placement work is very difficult because I obviously can't work in a bar or in a restaurant. But I don't disclose that I'm disabled because I feel like it might impede the view of me in a certain degree.
Have you actually directly experienced it, or is it just a fear?
I have gone to an interview where I was never explained why I didn't get the job. Obviously, you're entitled to get feedback from interviews, and I went to a particular interview and I asked for feedback and I was never given it. No employer is directly going to tell you to your face, we're not going to employ you because you're in a wheelchair. They're going to think of another way to phrase it, obviously. But so I've been refused feedback from interviews. I've been told that I can't run after naughty children, so therefore I can't be a teaching assistant. I've been told that I don't have the capability to travel on the tube, so I can't do short-term work and various things like that.
Madeline, you're visually impaired and you try to keep that hidden, don't you? How do you try to keep that hidden? What do you do?
Well, if I'm going to an interview, I won't take my guide dog. I'll use a white cane and I'll fold it up and put it in my bag before I go into the building. I've got enough residual sight to make people think. And then I'll only disclose towards the end of the interview that I have a disability.
And why is it that you do that?
Well, I feel that if you can get your foot in the door, demonstrate that you sort of look normal, whatever, they don't pick up on your disability, then you're more likely to get the job.
Have you been concerned that you have been directly discriminated against because of your visual impairment?
Yes, I have had situations where as soon as I've told them that I'm visually impaired, the atmosphere changed completely, and I'm sure I lost the job because of that.
Samantha, what difficulties have you encountered because of your disability?
So I'm really not surprised by the statistics brought up by Scope. Over 50% of people with impairments have felt some form of discrimination. I used to be a high school teacher and now I'm an actress, and I think the difference is now I'm working with a lot of people on a big set. Time is money. You can physically see my disability. I do not hide that. What I do hide is the fact that I have chronic pain on a daily basis. And the last big TV appearance, or what I was doing, I had chronic backache. And I thought, I can't stop all these people. There's over 100 people on set. You know, if I stop now, time is money. And I didn't want to disclose that. But I eventually did, because I had to, and I asked for a pillow to be put in my back. And I felt that, you know, it's about communication. Nobody made me feel uncomfortable, the fact that I'd stopped the production. They were more concerned about my well-being. But I am not surprised that a lot of people do want to hide their disability for fear of, you know, possibly losing their job or being seen as, I hate the word, but being seen as a burden. So yeah, I mean, I have experienced that even recently when I go for auditions. I ask, is it 100% accessible? Yes, I'm told it's accessible. I get there and there's a step. So, you know, it's about learning, it's about talking with people with disabilities, it's about us coming on TV shows like this and educating.
I mean, Madeline, from what you're saying, it sounds like you're concerned that there is always a perspective, and from what you're saying as well, Storm, that people are looking at you not thinking, what can you do, but what can't you do?
Yes, they sort of put barriers in place. They imagine barriers to be there, that there's ways around them. You've got the solutions. For example, I travel as part of my job. You will get on application forms, do you have a driving licence? Do you have use of your own car? It's, you know, you can use public transport, you can use taxis. You don't need to be able to drive to move around within a job.
Let's bring in Paul Wilson, because he's also joining us now from one of our outside studios. You've got rheumatoid arthritis, Paul, and you need a power wheelchair to get around. What difficulties does that bring?
Good morning.
Good morning.
And yes, so just for instance, getting around, so I use a wheelchair full time, and just getting here this morning was a real mission, because my local area wasn't able to provide any wheelchair accessible taxis. So the company that picked me up had to come from at least 35 miles away. So that poses a problem straight away.
Sure.
For anyone wanting to go to work.
So, I mean, in a work context, have you ever felt that you've actually directly been discriminated against because of your disability?
I think in terms of discrimination, there has been instances throughout my working life where I've had to take time off for hospital appointments, and when you're disabled, you have a lot more general doctor's appointments, consultants appointments than the average person, and unfortunately, when you work for a business, that's not always it's not always the done thing to do. You feel under pressure not to go to a lot of doctor's appointments or consultant's appointment, or even have time off ill with your disability.
What about the rest of you on that? I mean, when you've sort of had to put your hand up and say, I need extra appointments or whatever, I mean, what have you had experiences along these lines?
I mean, even things like your wheelchair breaking. There are some times when parts on your wheelchair break and you can't, obviously I use a power wheelchair, I have a manual wheelchair, but I use it only in the house. So if I can't leave my house to go outside and travel independently on my own,
Stuck.
I'm stuck and I can't go to work. So but there's not a lot I can really do about that, because I use...
And do you feel you can be open and say that, or do you feel you have to make excuses?
I feel like you can't apologise for it. I mean, at the same time, you don't feel good saying it, but at the same time, you can't apologise for it, that this is the situation.
Because Samantha, I mean, you said that when you had that bad back and you actually finally spoke up, actually people wanted to help.
Yeah, most definitely. However, I've had a bad experience where I've got a condition called brittle bones. I fracture very easily, and when I was a teacher, I did have a fracture, and I didn't tell anyone I went to work with a fracture, because I was conscious that I didn't want to take too much time off work, because obviously when you're educating children, you can't afford to do that. So I have hidden in the past when I've been quite severely injured, and that's a shame. There should be a bit more of a support network for people to be able to say, look, I might have to take 2 weeks off.
I think you have a higher wall to climb if you want to be seen as professional and conduct yourself well, and you want to be seen in a positive and as an asset to a workforce. If you're disabled, you have a higher wall to climb. You need to constantly prove it on an everyday basis by turning up on time every day. Don't be late. Don't make sure your chair is working fine. Don't do anything that will make you look like more of a burden than you should be.
I mean, that's a good way to put it, isn't it? A higher wall to climb. All of you facing challenges. We were hearing from Paul just the challenge of actually even getting somewhere. Do you feel that is recognised?
You've got to sort of be better at your job. You're constantly trying to make up or to sort of prove yourself. So you've got that pressure on all the time.
Paul, have you ever felt that it's actually recognised by those around you, that instead of being something that they maybe should be feel concerned about in a workplace in terms of it having a negative impact, actually it underlines the strength and resilience in you, that you actually have to encounter these things on a daily basis, and you get on and you do it?
I think depending on your line manager or supervisor, and depending on job as well, I think sometimes you get some very good managers, people managers, who are very good. They understand their staff and their problems, and they'll manage everyone's problems to, you know, within the business. Whereas unfortunately, you'll get other managers that don't necessarily have the background on employment or people management, who will not be as caring or as understanding within a working environment.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming in.